Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1430B, and today's date is November 20th, 2017, and the title of the episode is, It has now turned into a head-to-head fight with the Cabal. Now, before I get started, I just want to make an announcement. I uploaded an interview with Craig Hemke. It is on the X22 Report Spotlight YouTube channel. So all you need to do is go over to YouTube, type in X22 Report Spotlight. It'll bring you right to the interview, or you can come over to x22report.com or newssentinel.com. Scroll down a little bit, look over to your right-hand side. You can play the video right on the site. Or go to Steemit. That's steemit.com/@X22Report. And you can play the video right on Steemit. Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, a couple of reports ago, we talked about the sexual harassment charges against Weinstein, and we said, it was going to go through Hollywood, and then eventually it was going to lead into D.C., and we're starting to see signs that it's hitting D.C. pretty darn hard. We see Al Franken. He was accused, and now there's another woman coming out saying that, yes, he groped her. And now, in a stunning revelation that could leave a stain on the Clintons, it looks like, 4 women have come out and have said that Bill Clinton sexually assaulted them. And we see at this point that it's hitting all these different politicians, and I believe it's going to hit even more, and I think this is going to go even further than just sexual harassment as time goes on. And we know we've been talking about the pedo ring, and a lot of individuals have been talking about the pedo ring, and I think we're going to start to see this type of information come out, and it's going to be exposed down the line. Do I think it's going to happen right now? No, but I think eventually what's going to happen is that all of this is going to lead into that, and it's going to lead into child trafficking, the pedo ring, and we're going to learn things that it's going to blow people's minds. And we've been talking about some of this stuff, and we're going to see a lot more of this come out, because what's happening is these truth bombs are hitting right now. Because the Cabal and the individuals, the good guys, they're going head to head. They're battling it out right now of who's going to have control over the entire system. And we can see right now that each side is doing whatever they possibly can to stay in power or get the power they need. And we can see the Cabal, they're not going to give up. They've been entrenched and they've been working in government for a very long time. They've been calling the shots. They've had total control, and they're still pushing the buttons in many areas. We see out in North Korea right now, the South Korean National Intelligence Service has warned that, yes, they detected suspicious activity in the North Missile Research Facility, and they're expecting some type of missile launch. Now, most likely they're going to have something launched maybe this Thanksgiving or around this time area, maybe on Friday, just to show that, oh, look, they launched a missile, which is meaningless because they're not firing it upon anyone. They're launching it, to test their missile system, just like every other country does. And the United States, for some reason, just doesn't like it. They feel it's threatening to the United States. No, that's not the reason. We discussed the many reasons why they need to go in there. They would like to bring military assets closer to China. That was their main agenda. Also, North Korea deals in opium. This is in competition with the CIA. And once again, they would like to have this part of Asia, and they like to control this part of Asia because this was part of the pivoting towards China and keeping them controlled. This was Obama's plan, and forcing them into what the Cabal wanted, the TPP. They wanted them to do exactly what the United States wanted, and they were hoping to bring Russia into this and maybe eventually get into war with both of these countries to cover up the economic collapse. But we can see right now, this is not happening whatsoever. I mean, Trump went over to Asia and made many economic deals with China, and I believe the opposite is happening right now. But we can see right now there are many different factions. There are many pressures that are being pushed right now to push some type of war with North Korea. Now, we have to go back to Syria when Trump fired these missiles, and everyone thought, that we're going to be invading, we were going to get Assad out of there, we were going to go to war with Russia. And actually, we were here saying, no, the opposite's going to happen, because when we look at all the indicators and everything that was going on, we saw that, no, the United States was actually pulling back. The United States was actually fighting the Islamic State. And the ones that were in there, the paid mercenaries, certain forces, they were controlled by the Cabal. I know everyone thinks that, oh, the U.S. is just one big happy family and the United States armed forces are all working together. No, there's different factions within there where the neocons, they're controlling certain areas. They want certain things done. And we have the other side that's saying, no, we don't want this done. Think about what happened during the period where Obama was calling the shots, telling the armed forces where to hit, because they were making sure that they were hitting the infrastructure of Syria, allowing the Islamic State to expand. Now we see the opposite happening, where the control went back to the armed forces and they're actually going after the Islamic State. This is why Russia was able to go after these paid mercenaries and to clean out, with Syria's help and Iran's help, a lot of the terrorist groups. So when we look at North Korea, we need to understand what is happening right now. Again, there's two sides battling it out right now. And we also see that North Korea, they are going to be visiting Cuba. They're on a diplomatic mission. And they're trying to build relationship with Cuba right now. And we understand that Russia wrote off a loan for Cuba, and this is why the United States said, oh, sanctions aren't working. Let's open it up. Let the people from the United States go to Cuba. Let's start relations, because they realized what was happening. Russia, once again, was getting close to Cuba. They didn't want this to happen. Now, with North Korea, we understand that China, Russia, Japan, Philippines, and the United States, they are talking to North Korea. And once again, many of the countries there don't care if North Korea has a nuclear weapon or a missile system, because they understand they are using this to protect themselves against regime change. They saw what happened in Libya. They saw what happened in Lebanon. They saw what happened in Iraq. Well, what was happening in Syria until Russia stepped in. They saw what happened in Ukraine. And they realized that, hey, if we don't protect ourselves, the United States is coming in and there's going to be regime change. So right now, Trump, with his administration, decided to declare North Korea as a state sponsor of terrorism. Now, they have a flimsy argument that, because of the hostage that was sent back to the United States and he died, that was one of the reasons. They were coming up with many different reasons, but they really don't support any type of militia, or they don't have groups that are going around the world pushing terrorism. Actually, if you look at the United States, they have Al-Qaeda, they have the Islamic State, they have Al-Shabaab. They support many different terrorist groups, along with Saudi Arabia and many other countries, but those countries are not a state sponsor of terrorism. Now, we understand that sanctions don't work. I mean, sanctions were on Cuba, Iran, Syria, and the rest. And I know Tillerson is out there saying, ooh, the sanctions are working. They have hardly any fuel left. The economy's hurting. They were saying this about Iran for years and years and years. They were saying this about Cuba for years and years and years. And guess what? They always found a way to bypass the sanctions. North Korea, they started to sell opium, and they were receiving currency, and this is how they were surviving all these years. And as new sanctions came on to North Korea, they moved away from the dollar, just like every other country does. And they figure out a way to go to the black market. They figure out a way to survive. So what is happening here, I do believe, is that there might have been some indication that there was some type of false flag getting ready to go off to bring us to war with North Korea unless he did something. And he pushed the idea of, okay, let's reinstate their state sponsor of terrorism, which will then trigger the sanctions, which will really do nothing to North Korea as the talks are still going on behind the scenes. Just like when everyone thought, ooh, he fired missiles into Syria, we're off to war with Russia. The corporate media was all over it. They thought this was happening. And we said, well, wait a minute. The base was cleared out. It hit nothing. The base was operational a couple hours later. And they said, oh, we're going in with 100,000 troops into Syria. Never happened. Actually, the opposite has happened. I think the same thing's happening here. It's one big wag the dog distraction for the cabal, for the neocons. And we're going to have to watch this. Now, again, anything can happen. Anything could go off and we could start a war with North Korea. But I do believe there was a special envoy coming from China going into North Korea to discuss certain things. Never really met with Kim Jong-un, but met with other diplomats. I believe they're getting closer and closer to peace. And eventually what's going to happen is the cabal is not going to be able to kick off their false flag that they want to do. Now, does this mean that this is not going to happen where they're not going to be able to kick off the false flag? No. But this is something that we need to watch very carefully here. Now, back during the Maidan in Ukraine, where there were these sniper shots, where they're saying that, look, Yanukovych was firing on his own people, he had snipers, he was hitting people. Well, it turns out, and we discussed this in depth during this period of time, where we said, no, these snipers, they weren't firing on the people from Yanukovych's side. It was from the other side. And from Italia's Channel 5, well, they released a documentary which reveals the truth about what happened during that period of time. These snipers came forward. They were hired by the opposition. They were told and instructed to fire upon the police and the people. So according to the documentary, Georgian Alexander and his two companions were hired in Tbilisi by Mamuka Mamulashvili to support the Euromaidan coup alongside with other Georgian and Lithuanian volunteers. And other leaders of the Ukrainian opposition distributed weapons among the hired volunteer groups, and their task, shoot the protesters and create chaos. And we can see right now, this is what triggered the whole rioting. This was triggered the fires. This triggered everything. And we know that Victoria Nuland, United States, the cabal was behind this. They paid $5 billion to have this entire coup go off in Ukraine to oust Yanukovych and capture Ukraine, except there was a problem. Crimea voted themselves away. The southeastern people said, we're not joining up with the new puppet government. And this has been in a standstill ever since, because what the cabal wanted is they wanted those pipelines coming from Russia because it fed everything into Europe. Because as soon as this happened, guess what? Joe Biden put his son on the board of directors in Ukraine. Same thing with John Kerry, his roommate from college. He put him on the board of directors. This was all planned. This was all done to put money in people's pockets, to gain control of this area, and to control the flow of natural gas into Europe from Russia. But the whole thing went south. We see the U.S. is quietly building up troops in Somalia, and we're seeing that over 500 troops are now there. And what I see happening there is that these troops are actually going after the Islamic State. What we have now is a division of armed forces in many of these countries where there are certain armed forces there that are actually firing at the Islamic State. There are certain cabal forces there that are still taking orders on the other side, and we're going head to head with all of these forces. And we see right now that other countries are coming out, like Erdogan from Turkey. Now, he is not innocent by any means. He was dealing with the Islamic State. He was making a lot of money off of the oil, and he came out and said, yeah, the U.S. is financing the Islamic State. They were the ones who were paying for it, and he was making, and his son were making a lot of money off of the oil that was being stolen from Syria, which was basically funding the entire operation. And of course, when Russia stepped in, they said, from our satellites, from our drones, you can see the oil convoys over the last year, why didn't the United States ever hit any of these oil convoys? So Russia started to hit the oil convoys, and then all of a sudden, the United States said, oh yeah, we're going to hit the oil convoy, but first we're going to, distribute a flyer to tell all the drivers and all the Islamic State individuals to get out of the trucks, and then we'll bomb them. So you could see what is happening here. The whole thing is starting to fall apart, and what's happening is the battle is being fought head-to-head right now. We see the Arab League, they held their emergency session on Iran, and what I see right now is they're building the case to go into Lebanon. Israel, they're making their push to invade Lebanon. They're saying that they're going after Hezbollah, and they're going to use this as a springboard to try to get into Syria and Iran and to start a war. And this is along with Saudi Arabia, and they're going to try to make the push. They're going to try to make this happen, but will it happen? We don't know. But we do see many trigger points happening all at once. We see Iran, Saudi Arabia, Lebanon, Israel, the United States, the Cabal. We also see North Korea. It's happening there, and they're trying to have something happen so we can move into this next phase, which is a war to cover up this economic collapse. And we see right now this is being pushed very, very hard. And we need to watch this very carefully because we're heading into a time period where Russia and Syria, they're going to push the issue of the United States leaving Syria. And they're going to say, listen, under international law, you have this many days to leave. And like I said, going back a couple reports ago, they only had a certain period of time, and we see that the last stronghold of the Islamic State, well, it has been demolished, and the Islamic State only is in a couple of villages. They're not even in cities, and they're being cleaned out very, very quickly. And it's only a matter of time where they say there's absolutely no reason, and they use international law to say the United States must leave. And this is why the Cabal is trying so hard to try to get something started, because the clock is ticking down. The economy is about to rip itself apart, and we see that we're entering this new year, and we know from The Economist magazine, they said we're going to be entering this new currency system in 2018, and you can see how everything is starting to build up right now, how everything's being pushed, and by the end of the year, I wouldn't be surprised if we see some type of an event. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.